Hi guys, welcome back to the Home and Homestead. I'm Rebecca, and today you'll be joining me in the kitchen where we do some apple harvest recipes. Today we'll be baking and making our family recipe of homemade apple dumplings. I remember making this recipe nearly every year with my mom, and we would get in the kitchen and make some delicious apple recipes for the apple harvest. So follow along while we head to the kitchen and make our family recipe for homemade apple dumplings. So the first thing that we need to do is prepare our apples. So in this large bowl I have some water with lemon juice. You could also use Ball Produce Protect. Other companies make this type of product as well, but ultimately water with an acid will help prevent your fruit from browning. Then next we're going to prepare our apples using this handy contraption here. It's a little turn crank, and what it does is it slices, cores, and peels your apples. You can also use a hand core, but I want to keep my apples whole so that I can place the filling within the center of the apples. And this little contraption works nice for this. So to use this, you place your apple on top, and this is the core, the slicer, and the peeler. And there's a little wing nut here. You loosen it with the wing nut in order to remove and slide the core and slicer away. So you press this lever on the side and slide back the arm. Then you can loosen this wing nut here, and that holds the core and the slicer blade. You just loosen it and slide it off to the side, and then you can just use the peeling option. So then you twist and push the apple past this peeling blade. So you just slide it back, put your apple on, and then you turn it and move it along this peeling blade. Now I have Honeycrisp apples. You can use whichever apple variety you'd like. So you just place your apple onto the end. Granny Smith apples work nicely as well. Then you just simply turn the crank and it goes along this peeling blade. This peeling blade is adjusted with this wing nut here, which I'll need to do because it's not peeling very well. But let's just get this first one done here. You can press this little lever and go back. So I'll go through again, try to get a little more skin. Yeah, I'll have to adjust this peeling blade. That's okay. You can also hand peel it, which I have my hand peeler off to the side here. So you can do all of this by hand as well. It's just using this device helps. So I'll just peel this skin off here. If you didn't want to use whole apples, you can do the peeling, coring, and slicing, and then chop it up and put pieces of apple in the middle of the dumpling. We always had our apples whole, so we used the corer and removed it. Put it down the middle. Then you have this nice hollow area. This one's kind of handy, has a release lever, then you can pop out the core once it's finished. But once you remove the core, then you have this central area where we can later put some filling in, and it's a really nice presentation for your homemade apple dumplings. But again, you could also core, slice, and peel using this machine, and then just chop it up and put about a cup of prepared apples inside of each of the apple dumpling dough portions that we will create later. So I'm going to adjust the tension of this peeling blade here. Just loosen the wing nut here and slide it forward, and that way it'll peel the apple a little nicer than that first one. I'm not going to keep my cores or stems, but I am going to keep my peels so I can make some apple juice later with that. So we'll just press this lever to release. That slides the arm back with the apple on it, and then turn the handle. There we go. Now it's peeling a lot nicer, and then this machine will peel your apple for you. So if you find using a machine like this that it's not quite peeling right, just adjust the tension on the peeling blade, and then it'll get a nicer, more thorough peel of your apple. So I'll use my core here, remove the central apple core, pop it out. And if there's any extra peel on there, you can certainly remove it with a paring knife or a hand peeler. I'm not too concerned about it, but I'm just going to remove any remnants of core that are left. And I'll place this into this large bowl of water with lemon juice. So I'll save these peels to make apple juice later, and I'll continue to prepare our apples for our homemade apple dumplings. Alright, so now let's head to the cooktop and we'll make our sauce. It'll go over the apple dumplings while they are baking. So I have my Dutch oven here. So we will need 3/4 of a cup of butter, which ends up being a stick and a half of butter. I got this up to medium-high heat. We'll let this butter melt. Alright, our butter has finished melting, so now we will add 3 cups of sugar. And I'll mix that in. As well as 3 cups of water. Mix all this together until the sugar dissolves. And next we'll add 4½ teaspoons of cinnamon. And now we'll mix all of this together, bring this up to a simmer and let this thicken. Okay, so we'll let this cook and thicken up, and this will become our sauce for our apple dumplings. So while this cooks down a bit, we can head over and make our dough. So now let's prepare our dough for our apple dumplings. So in this bowl I have 6 cups of flour, and I have my Danish whisk here as well as a silicone spatula. To the flour I'm going to add 1½ teaspoons of salt and 4½ teaspoons of baking powder. Mix these dry ingredients together here. Then I will add 1 cup of shortening. So if you buy your shortening in the little sticks, much like you would see butter, it'd be 1 stick of that shortening. Otherwise 1 cup. And I'm just mixing it through until we get small little pieces of shortening throughout, about the size of a pea. Okay. And to that I will add 2 cups of milk. We'll mix that all together. Alright, so let's roll out our apple dumpling dough. So we're going to roll it out to about 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch thick. And we're making 12 apple dumplings today, so I need to roll this out nice and big so I'll be able to cut this into 12 different portions. So let me keep rolling this out, and then I'll try to figure out the shape I want that will give me the best option for 12 portions. If I can try to keep it more in a rectangle, that should work pretty well. So let me try to make that shape here. Now I'll use a pastry cutter and try to cut out about 12 portions of this dough. I'll roll it out a little bit thinner right before I add the apples, but we just want to cut out our portions and plan ahead for the next step. And I'll place these pieces of dough portions off to the side. Okay, so I have my 12 pieces of dumpling dough prepared for our 12 whole apples, and here I prepared a dumpling filling, which is 2 cups of sugar, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. You could also add raisins in here optionally. So what I'm going to do is spoon this filling inside of the hole that we created by removing the apple core, and then the cinnamon, sugar, and nutmeg mixture will create a really nice sauce inside of these apple dumplings. Then I'll fold opposite ends of the dumpling dough to meet on top, and I'll pinch it down and press it together, and I'll just crimp the edges to create a seal where all the dough edges came together. You can also kind of form them closer around the apple. So let me place another dough here, and I'll roll this out. Let me make a little more room here. Let me get my smaller rolling pin. That'll work a little easier. So I'm going to roll this out to about an 1/8 inch thick. And it doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle or anything. This dough is rather forgiving, and we'll stretch it to meet on top of our prepared apples. So I'll place one of our prepared apples that we had sitting in the bowl of lemon juice, and it hasn't browned or anything. And now we'll add our cinnamon, sugar, and nutmeg mixture to the central hollow area we created by removing the core. Then take opposite ends, fold them, meet them on top, pinch it down, and press it together, and just seal any edges and form it around the apple. Now I'll place them on a rimmed baking pan and continue to make all of our homemade apple dumplings. So now we have created 12 homemade apple dumplings. What I'm going to do today is bake 4 of them, and then I'll place 8 of them off to the side and place them in the freezer so that I can freeze them for baking at a later time. So let me select 8 of these apple dumplings, and I'll put them onto this cookie sheet here and place them into the freezer for about 2 hours. Then once the apple dumplings have completely frozen, then I can put them into a freezer safe zip top bag or vacuum seal freezer bag. Then they'll be all prepared and ready to go when I want to bake some apple dumplings at a later time. So I'll place 8 apple dumplings on this pan and set it off to the side. And I'll spread out these 4 that I'm going to bake today on this rimmed baking pan. Now for the 4 that I'm going to bake today, we need to add the sauce that we created on the stovetop. It cooked down and simmered, and it's thickened to a nice sauce consistency. So let me pour a little bit over the top. This will create a little bit of a glaze on the apple dumplings, and a bunch of it will fall off to the side, but that's perfect because we're going to be basting these apple dumplings as they bake in the oven. So I poured a little on top. Let me ladle some on top as well, because that'll get it covered a little bit nicer. And I'm going to save a portion of this sauce that we prepared so I can put that into freezer safe containers. So I'll freeze the sauce as well as some apple dumplings for baking later. So let me finish putting some sauce on top of these dumplings we're going to bake today, and then we'll get them into the oven. So we're going to bake these at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. And after 15 minutes, I'll take some of the sauce, baste the apple dumpling, and continue baking. So you're going to baste them every 15 minutes until they're nice and golden brown and the sauce is thickened nicely and made a nice thick glaze coating on these apple dumplings. So we'll get them in the oven and bake them for 45 minutes. And now for these 8 that I'm going to freeze, I have a parchment paper lined rimmed pan. I'll just place them on here. And then once they're completely frozen, then I can put them into a freezer safe zip top bag. So let me get these into the freezer. All right guys, our homemade apple dumplings have finished baking. So they took 45 minutes total at 350 degrees, and after 15 minutes I basted the dumplings by spooning the sauce and drizzling it over the top, and then I did another 15 minutes and basted again, and the final 15 minutes to make it 45 minutes total. And they're nice and golden brown, and the sauce has thickened to a really delicious cinnamon caramely type of sauce. We'll take a little closer look here. So now I'm just going to let these cool a little bit, and then we'll cut into one and have a taste. Alright guys, here you have it. Here are our homemade apple dumplings. This is my family's recipe, and I remember making this nearly every year in the fall with my mother. These are really tasty, and just making these today was really fun and reminding me of my childhood making these homemade treats. These make a wonderful dessert following a hearty fall or cold weather seasoned meal, or just a really tasty and comforting snack that's sweet and delicious. You can serve them and eat them as is, nice and warm, or you can also serve them with some ice cream. So let's cut into this homemade apple dumpling. The outside is nice and crispy. It has the outer cinnamon sauce that turned into a nice glaze. And when you cut into the apple, the central cinnamon, sugar, and nutmeg mixture that we put into where the core was becomes this nice ooey and gooey sauce as you cut into it, much like a lava cake would. So it's really kind of fun to keep the apples whole and have the presentation and enjoying these apple dumplings like this. You could also cut up your apples if you preferred and just place a handful of chopped apples with maybe some raisins and some cinnamon, sugar, and nutmeg mixture on top, and then enclose that in your apple dumpling dough to create this dessert as well. But I really like doing the whole apples, and that's the way we typically would do it growing up. Well, I hope you enjoyed our family recipe of homemade apple dumplings. If you'd like more inspiration or ideas of what to do with apples, I plan to do a number of apple harvest recipes with you guys, so be sure to check them out. Well, if you're new to the channel or haven't done so yet, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. And if you enjoyed this or any other videos that you watch, please give them a thumbs up. And be sure to check out some other videos I have on recipes in the kitchen, food preservation, home decor organization, and gardening. Well, I hope you're having a wonderful day. See you next time. Take care.